Tejo wiped grease from his hands with an old cloth and looked at the broken mining drill on his workbench. The massive machine sat silent and cold, its metal surface scratched from months of hard work in the deep tunnels below mining station Kepler 442b. Like everything else that came to his workshop, it had simply stopped working one day, leaving the miners frustrated and behind schedule. He lived for moments like these. While other people on the station worried about quotas and deadlines, Tejo found peace in the quiet hum of his workshop. Here in the lower levels, away from the busy corridors above, he could focus on what he did best, fixing things. The workshop was small but organized perfectly for his needs. Tools hung in neat rows on the walls, each one cleaned and returned to its proper place after every use. Spare parts filled labeled bins along one wall, sorted by size and function. A single workbench dominated the center of the room, equipped with diagnostic equipment and repair tools that most people on the station had never seen before. Tejo had built this space slowly over 3 years, trading favors and finding forgotten supplies in storage rooms throughout the station. Commander Li Dongwu barely noticed the quiet technician who kept the mining equipment running. Most people barely noticed him at all. That suited Tejo just fine. He plugged a diagnostic cable into the broken drill and watched numbers scroll across his computer screen. The power core showed full charge. The hydraulic systems tested normal. But somewhere deep inside the machine something had failed. Tejo smiled slightly. These kinds of problems were his specialty. The morning alarm chimed through the station speakers, marking the start of another day. 300 people lived and worked on Kepler 442b, all focused on extracting rare minerals from the planet's crust. The work was dangerous and difficult, made possible only by the complex machines that Tejo maintained and repaired. Dr. Park Sora knocked on his workshop door just after breakfast. The chief medical officer was one of the few people who visited him regularly, bringing broken equipment from the medical bay and staying to chat while he worked. "Good morning, Tejo," she said, carrying a damaged atmospheric processor under one arm. This one started making strange noises yesterday and stopped working completely overnight. Tejo cleared space on his workbench and examined the device. It was responsible for maintaining air quality in the medical bay, a critical system that could not stay broken for long. He connected his diagnostic equipment and began running tests while Sora settled into the single chair beside his workbench. "Did you hear about the energy readings?" she asked, watching him work with practiced patience. The survey team detected some unusual signatures in the northern forests yesterday. Tejo nodded absently, his attention focused on the readouts appearing on his screen. The processor's main filter had become clogged with microscopic particles, probably from the volcanic dust that sometimes entered the station's air intake systems. A simple cleaning would restore full function. "Commander Li thinks it might be some kind of natural phenomenon," Sora continued. "But the patterns look almost artificial to me. Very regular, like they were created by some kind of technology." The words barely registered in Tejo's mind. He had learned long ago that the station's scientific staff loved to speculate about the planet's mysteries. Energy readings, unusual rock formations, strange weather patterns. They found endless fascination in every minor anomaly. Meanwhile, the machines that kept them all alive required constant attention and repair. He opened the processor's housing and carefully removed the clogged filter. The damage was worse than expected, with several delicate components corroded by exposure to acidic particles. This repair would take most of the morning. "I'll need a few hours to fix this properly," he told Sora, already calculating which parts he would need from his supply bins. "The filter system needs complete replacement." Sora nodded and stood to leave. "No rush," she said. "The backup system can handle things for a while. Just let me know when it's ready." After she left, Tejo settled into the familiar rhythm of detailed repair work. He dismantled the processor piece by piece, cleaning each component and testing it separately. Some parts could be restored with careful attention. Others needed replacement with new components from his spare parts inventory. The work required total concentration. One small mistake could damage expensive equipment or create safety hazards for the entire station. But Tejo had steady hands and infinite patience. He understood machines in ways that came naturally, seeing patterns and connections that others missed. The morning passed quietly in his workshop. Occasionally, footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, but nobody else needed his services. The mining shifts were working smoothly today. their equipment functioning normally thanks to his careful maintenance schedule. Around midday, the first strange thing happened. A tremor shook dust from the ceiling, rattling tools in their holders and causing his diagnostic screens to flicker briefly. Tejo looked up from his work, listening for more vibrations. Mining charges sometimes created tremors, but the timing seemed wrong. The blasting crews usually worked in the afternoon, not during the lunch break. He returned to the atmospheric processor, assuming someone had simply changed the schedule. The mining operation ran on strict timetables, but adjustments happened frequently based on geological conditions and equipment availability. The second strange thing was the emergency alert that echoed through the corridors 30 minutes later. A calm voice announced a perimeter breach in Sector 7, requesting all security personnel to report to their stations. Tejo had heard similar announcements before, usually caused by sensor malfunctions or small wildlife that wandered too close to the station's outer walls. He continued working on the processor, replacing damaged components with careful precision. The job was nearly finished when the third strange thing caught his attention. A dark stain on the floor near his workshop door, barely visible in the dim corridor lighting. Curiosity finally overcame his focus on the repair work. Tejo set down his tools and stepped into the corridor to examine the stain more closely. It was definitely blood, still wet and dark red against the pale metal flooring. A thin trail led from the outer sections of the station toward the abandoned storage bay next to his workshop. Someone or something was injured and bleeding. The trail was too large to come from a small cut or minor accident. Whatever had left these stains was seriously hurt. Tejo followed the blood trail through empty corridors toward the storage bay. His rational mind told him to report this to security immediately. Station protocol required notification of any unusual incidents. But something about the situation felt different. The blood trail was too purposeful, too directed. Something intelligent had made this path. The storage bay door stood slightly open, darkness visible beyond the threshold. Tejo could hear soft sounds from inside, like careful movement among the stacked supply containers. Something was definitely in there, something that needed help. He pushed the door open slowly and stepped inside. The thing that emerged from behind the containers changed everything Tejo thought he knew about the universe. It was beautiful and terrifying and completely impossible, but it was also bleeding and afraid and looking at him with desperate hope in its large amber eyes. His simple life as a repair technician had just become infinitely more complicated. The creature that stepped into the dim light of the storage bay made Tejo forget how to breathe. It stood almost as tall as he did, moving with smooth grace despite the obvious pain that made each step careful and slow. White fur covered its entire body, marked with delicate silver patterns that seemed to shimmer in the artificial lighting. This was not an animal. The intelligence in those large amber eyes was unmistakable. The creature watched Tejo with the same careful attention he gave to complex machinery, studying him with obvious thought and consideration. When their eyes met, Tejo felt a strange connection that he had never experienced with another living being. Dark blood matted the pristine white fur along the creature's left shoulder. 3 deep gashes ran parallel across the muscle, still bleeding slowly despite what looked like attempts at self-treatment. The wounds were serious enough to be life-threatening without proper medical care. Tejo's first instinct was to run. Every safety protocol on the station demanded immediate notification of alien contact. Commander Lee would want to know about this within minutes. The security teams would surround the storage bay with weapons and protective equipment, but something in those amber eyes stopped him from moving toward the door. The creature was not threatening him. Despite its size and obvious strength, it remained perfectly still, watching him with what looked almost like hope. It was hurt and alone and trusting him not to cause more harm. The rational part of his mind screamed warnings about unknown diseases and possible dangers. He knew nothing about this being's physiology or behavior. It could be carrying deadly infections or might become violent if cornered. Every logical argument pointed toward immediate retreat and official notification. Instead, Tejo found himself taking a step forward. The creature did not move away. It continued watching him with those intelligent eyes while blood dripped steadily from its wounded shoulder onto the metal floor. Its breathing was shallow and quick, suggesting significant blood loss and possible shock. Tejo raised his hands slowly, palms open and visible. The gesture seemed to register with the creature, which tilted its head slightly in what might have been curiosity or understanding. When he took another careful step forward, it remained motionless. "Easy," Tejo whispered, using the same gentle tone he employed when working with delicate equipment. "I want to help." The creature's ears, which had been pressed flat against its head, lifted slightly at the sound of his voice. Its breathing seemed to slow a fraction, though the wounds continued bleeding at a concerning rate. Tejo knelt slowly beside the injured being, moving with the same patience he used for precision repair work. The creature watched every motion but did not retreat or show signs of aggression. Up close, he could see that the wounds were even worse than they had appeared from a distance. The gashes were deep enough to expose muscle tissue beneath the thick fur. They had the clean edges of cuts made by very sharp objects, possibly claws from some larger predator, but the spacing and angle seemed wrong for any animal attack Tejo had ever seen. These looked almost like weapon marks. Working by instinct rather than training, he examined the injuries with gentle fingers. The creature flinched slightly at his touch but did not pull away. Its skin felt warm and normal, suggesting mammalian physiology similar to earth animals he had known as a child. "I need supplies," Tejo told the creature, speaking more to calm himself than expecting understanding. "Medical kit, bandages, just stay here." To his amazement, the being seemed to comprehend. It settled more comfortably against the supply containers, amber eyes following his movements as he searched the storage bay for emergency medical supplies. Every station storage area contained basic first aid equipment for workplace accidents. Tejo found a comprehensive medical kit, tucked behind stacks of spare parts, and brought it back to the wounded creature. His hands shook slightly as he opened the kit and laid out supplies on the clean floor. The creature watched with obvious interest as he prepared to treat its wounds. When he approached with antiseptic solution, it offered no resistance. The cleaning process must have been painful, but the being remained perfectly still throughout the procedure. Tejo worked with the same methodical care he brought to equipment repairs. He cleaned each wound thoroughly, removing debris and checking for signs of infection. The creature's physiology seemed compatible with human medical supplies, responding normally to antiseptic and healing compounds. The hardest part was closing the deepest gashes. Tejo had no surgical training, but the wounds needed immediate attention to stop the bleeding. He used synthetic tissue bonding gel from the emergency kit, carefully sealing the edges of each cut while the creature watched with patient endurance. Throughout the entire process, not once did the being show aggression or fear. It seemed to understand that he was trying to help, accepting his ministrations with remarkable trust. When he began wrapping the wounds with sterile bandages, the creature actually moved slightly to make his work easier. The job took over an hour. By the time Tejo finished, both of them were exhausted. The creature's breathing had returned to normal, and the dangerous bleeding had stopped. The bandages looked professional enough to satisfy a real medic, at least until proper treatment could be arranged. As he packed away the remaining medical supplies, the creature did something completely unexpected. It reached out with one clawed finger and gently touched the back of his hand. The gesture lasted only a moment, but its meaning was unmistakable. Gratitude. Tejo felt tears prick the corners of his eyes. In 32 years of life, no one had ever thanked him for anything with such simple, honest emotion. The touch conveyed more appreciation than all the official commendations and salary bonuses he had ever received. "You're welcome," he whispered, not caring whether the creature understood the words. The being settled back against the containers with obvious relief. The immediate crisis had passed, but dozens of questions remained unanswered. What was this creature? Where had it come from? How had it been injured? Most importantly, what was he going to do now? Reporting the encounter meant ending any chance of learning those answers. Security would take the creature away for study and interrogation. Scientists would treat it as a specimen rather than a person. The connection he had felt during those first moments would be lost forever. But keeping this secret meant violating every regulation that governed the station. If discovered, he would face serious consequences for failing to report alien contact. His career and possibly his freedom depended on making the right choice. The creature looked at him with those intelligent amber eyes, and Tejo realized his decision was already made. Some things were more important than regulations. He would find a way to protect this wounded being, whatever the cost to himself. 3 weeks had passed since Taeho first found the wounded creature in the storage bay. What began as a desperate act of compassion had grown into something he never expected. The being he privately called Bekho was not just intelligent but remarkably similar to himself in ways that continued to surprise him. Every morning before his official duties began, Taeho would slip into the storage bay with food and fresh bandages. Every evening after the day shift ended, he would return to check on his secret patient and spend time in quiet companionship. The routine had become as natural as breathing, despite the constant risk of discovery. Bekho healed with incredible speed. The deep shoulder wounds that should have taken months to recover from were already showing healthy pink skin beneath the pristine white fur. The creature moved more freely each day, though it still favored the injured side when lifting heavy objects. And Bekho did lift heavy objects. That was the first surprise. Instead of remaining helpless while recovering, the creature had begun organizing the cluttered storage bay with methodical precision that matched Taeho's own work habits. Supply containers were sorted by size and contents. Emergency equipment was cleaned and arranged for easy access. Even the dust and debris had been swept into neat piles. Communication developed gradually through gestures and simple demonstrations. Bekho possessed obvious intelligence, learning to recognize different human expressions and responding to basic hand signals. More importantly, it seemed to understand the need for secrecy, remaining perfectly quiet whenever footsteps approached the storage bay. The second surprise came when Bekho started showing interest in the broken equipment that Taeho sometimes brought to the HFY storage bay for private repairs. Complex machinery seemed to fascinate the creature in the same way it fascinated Taeho himself. When he worked on a damaged mining scanner, Bekho watched every movement with intense concentration. "You understand this, don't you?" Taeho asked one evening, holding up a circuit board with several burned connections. "You know what these components do?" Bekho tilted its head and made a soft sound that might have been agreement. When Taeho pointed to specific circuits, the creature nodded or shook its head in ways that suggested real comprehension of electronic systems. Testing this theory, Taeho brought increasingly complex devices to their evening sessions. A broken atmospheric recycler, a damaged communication relay, a mining drill with mysterious power failures. In each case, Bekho studied the equipment with obvious understanding, occasionally making gestures that looked almost like suggestions. The breakthrough came when Taeho's portable diagnostic scanner stopped working completely. The device was essential for his repair work, and replacement parts would take weeks to arrive from the nearest supply depot. He had spent hours trying to locate the fault without success. Bekho watched his frustration for several minutes before disappearing behind the supply containers. When it returned, the creature carried something that made Taeho's breath catch in his throat. The device looked similar to his broken scanner, but was clearly far more advanced than any human technology. "Where did you get this?" Taeho whispered, accepting the alien device with trembling hands. Bekho gestured to its thick fur, indicating that the tool had been hidden somewhere in its coat. When Taeho examined the device more closely, he discovered it was not just similar to his scanner, but performed the same function with impossible precision. Internal circuitry that his human equipment could barely detect appeared in perfect detail on the alien device's display. Working together, they used Bekho's advanced scanner to diagnose the problem with Taeho's equipment. A single microscopic component had failed, so small that human instruments could not locate it reliably. With the alien device showing exactly where to look, the repair took only minutes. "This changes everything," Taeho said, staring at the restored scanner in amazement. "Your people have technology that's decades ahead of ours." Bekho made a sound that might have been sadness. It gestured toward its healing wounds, then pointed in the direction of the northern forests. Whatever had injured the creature had also separated it from its own people and their advanced civilization. From that night forward, their relationship deepened beyond simple friendship. They became partners in a way that transcended species barriers. Taeho would bring broken human equipment to the storage bay, and together they would repair it using a combination of human techniques and alien tools. The work was incredibly satisfying. Bekho's devices could diagnose problems that would have taken Taeho days to locate manually. In return, Taeho's repair skills and understanding of human manufacturing standards helped adapt solutions that worked reliably with station equipment. But maintaining the secret required increasingly creative explanations for his extended absences from the main workshop. Dr. Sora had begun asking pointed questions about his whereabouts during off-duty hours. Commander Lee had noticed that equipment repairs were being completed faster than ever before, leading to awkward conversations about work efficiency and time management. "I've been conducting deep maintenance on the critical systems," Teho told Sora when she asked about his unusual schedule. "Preventive work that requires extended analysis periods." The explanation satisfied her medical mind, which understood the importance of thorough preparation. But Teho could see growing curiosity in her eyes. Soon she might start asking for specific details that would be impossible to provide without revealing Bekho's existence. Commander Lee presented a different challenge. The station commander trusted Teho's technical expertise, but expected detailed reports on all maintenance activities. Explaining the sudden improvement in repair times without mentioning alien assistance required increasingly elaborate stories about new diagnostic techniques and efficiency improvements. "I've been cataloging our spare parts inventory," Teho informed the commander during their weekly status meeting. "Better organization has streamlined the repair process significantly." Lee nodded approvingly, making notes in his personnel file about Teho's initiative and improved productivity. But he also scheduled surprise inspections of the main workshop, forcing Teho to ensure that all evidence of his partnership with Bekho remained hidden in the storage bay. The most dangerous moment came when Yoon Nari, the communications officer, detected unusual energy signatures near the lower levels of the station. Her equipment had picked up electromagnetic emissions that didn't match any known human technology. "The readings are very faint," she reported during the morning briefing, "but they appear to be coming from somewhere in the maintenance sections." Teho's heart pounded as he realized that Bekho's advanced tools were probably generating detectable energy signatures. Discovery seemed inevitable unless they found a way to mask or eliminate the alien technology's electromagnetic emissions. That evening, he explained the danger to Bekho through gestures and simple drawings. The creature understood immediately, nodding gravely as Teho described the scanning equipment that might detect its presence. Without hesitation, Bekho began modifying its tools with adjustments too complex for human understanding. Within hours, the energy signatures disappeared completely. Nari's next scan detected nothing unusual, leading her to conclude that the previous readings had been caused by solar interference or equipment malfunction. Their secret remained safe, but Teho realized that time was running out. Eventually, someone would discover Bekho despite their precautions. When that happened, he would need to choose between his duty to the station and his loyalty to the remarkable being who had become his closest friend. For now, he chose friendship over duty, hoping that somehow they could continue their partnership without discovery. The warning signs began with reports from the northern survey teams. Dr. Sora mentioned them during her regular visits to Teho's workshop, bringing broken medical equipment and sharing the latest station gossip while he worked. "The geological teams are finding some very strange things out there," she said, settling into her usual chair beside his workbench. "Massive disruptions in the forest canopy. Trees knocked down in perfect circles like something huge landed repeatedly in the same areas." Teho nodded absently while examining a damaged patient monitor. His attention was focused on replacing burned circuits, but part of his mind registered the concern in Sora's voice. The northern forests were only 50 kilometers from the mining station, close enough that large-scale disturbances might affect their operations. "Commander Lee thinks it might be some kind of new volcanic activity," Sora continued. "But the patterns don't match anything in the geological surveys. These look almost artificial, like they were created deliberately." The words made Teho look up from his work. Something about the description triggered a memory of Bekho's behavior over the past few days. His alien friend had become increasingly restless, often staring toward the northern sections of the station with obvious anxiety. "What kind of patterns?" Teho asked, setting down his repair tools. Sora pulled out her tablet and showed him aerial photographs taken by the survey drones. The images showed dozens of circular clearings scattered throughout the dense forest. Each clearing was exactly the same size, with trees knocked down in radiating patterns that suggested something large and heavy had descended from above. "The spacing is too regular for natural phenomena," Sora explained. "Each clearing is exactly 2 kilometers from its nearest neighbors. arranged in a perfect grid pattern across nearly 100 square kilometers of forest. Tejo studied the photographs with growing unease. The clearings looked like landing sites for large aircraft or spacecraft, but no human vessels were big enough to create such massive disturbances, and the regular spacing suggested organized activity rather than random crashes. "Has anyone investigated these sites directly?" he asked. "Commander Lee sent a ground team to examine the nearest clearing yesterday," Sora replied. "They found some very unusual things. Scorch marks on the remaining trees that don't match any known weapons or natural causes, strange metal fragments that our analysis equipment can't identify, and tracks." "What kind of tracks?" Sora switched to another image on her tablet. The photograph showed deep impressions in the forest soil, clearly made by something large and heavy. But the shape was wrong for any vehicle or animal that Tejo recognized. The tracks had multiple toe-like projections, almost like enormous clawed feet. "The xenobiology team thinks they might be from some previously unknown species of large predator," Sora said. "But the size is incredible. These tracks suggest creatures over 3 meters tall, much larger than anything else we've cataloged on this planet." Tejo felt ice forming in his stomach. The tracks looked remarkably similar to Bekho's feet, but scaled up to tremendous size. Whatever had made these impressions was related to his alien friend, but vastly more powerful. That evening, he brought the photographs to the storage bay and showed them to Bekho. The creature's reaction was immediate and intense. Its ears flattened against its head, and it made soft sounds of obvious distress while studying the images. "You know what these are, don't you?" Tejo asked gently. Bekho pointed to the tracks, then to its own feet, confirming Tejo's suspicion that they were made by beings of the same species. But when Tejo pointed to himself and then to Bekho, trying to ask if these were its people, the creature shook its head vigorously. Using gestures and simple drawings, Bekho began trying to communicate something urgent. It drew pictures in the dust on the storage bay floor, showing stick figures that seemed to represent different groups. One group was small and peaceful like Bekho itself. The other group was much larger and appeared to be chasing or attacking the first group. The message was clear enough to chill Tejo's blood. The creatures making those massive tracks were not Bekho's people. They were something else entirely, something that Bekho's people feared. Over the following days, the reports from the northern forests grew increasingly alarming. The survey teams discovered more clearings appearing overnight, always in the same organized grid pattern. The mysterious creatures were expanding their presence systematically, moving closer to the mining station with each new site. Commander Lee called emergency meetings to discuss evacuation procedures. The station's security teams began conducting combat readiness drills. Dr. Sora prepared the medical bay for potential casualties while requesting emergency supplies from the nearest military depot. Through it all, Bekho became more agitated with each passing hour. The creature paced the storage bay restlessly, making urgent sounds and pointing repeatedly toward the northern sections of the station. It was trying desperately to communicate something important, but the language barrier made complex explanations impossible. The breakthrough came when Tejo brought Bekho to the observation deck during the night shift. The northern forest were visible in the distance, dark shapes against the star-filled sky. Using the deck's magnification equipment, Tejo could see the clearings marked by the absence of trees in the forest canopy. But Bekho saw more than missing trees. The creature pointed urgently at specific areas of the forest, making agitated sounds that suggested imminent danger. When Tejo adjusted the magnification to maximum power, he finally understood what his friend was trying to show him. Massive shapes moved between the remaining trees, too large and too numerous to be natural wildlife. They traveled in organized groups, following paths that led directly toward the human settlement. Even at this distance, their size was impressive enough to be visible through the observation equipment. "How many are there?" Tejo whispered. Though he knew Bekho couldn't answer in words, his alien friend held up all 10 fingers multiple times, indicating numbers far beyond anything the station's defenses could handle. These creatures were not simply large predators wandering randomly through the forest. They were an organized force moving with obvious intelligence and hostile intent. Tejo finally understood what had happened to Bekho. The wounds on its shoulder had not been caused by simple animal attacks. They were weapon marks inflicted by these larger creatures during some kind of conflict. Beko had escaped from them and fled to the human station, bringing danger along without meaning to. But now that danger was approaching the mining station directly, the mysterious creatures had tracked Beko's trail or simply decided that the human settlement represented a valuable target. Either way, 300 people were about to face an enemy they didn't understand and couldn't possibly defeat with conventional weapons. The first attack came 2 days later, just before dawn. Emergency alarms shrieked through the corridors as external sensors detected multiple large contacts approaching from the forest. Emergency lights bathed the station in red, while security teams rushed to defensive positions. From the storage bay, Tejo watched through a small window as dark shapes emerged from the tree line. They moved with military precision, surrounding the station in coordinated groups while maintaining perfect formation. This was not a random raid by wild animals. This was an invasion. Commander Lee's voice echoed through the intercom system, ordering all non-essential personnel to emergency shelters while combat teams prepared for possible assault. The station's defensive weapons powered up with electronic whines that could be heard throughout the facility. But Tejo knew their weapons would not be enough. Whatever was out there had technology advanced enough to travel between worlds and intelligence sufficient to plan complex military operations. The human mining station was hopelessly outmatched. Beside him in the storage bay, Beko made sounds of obvious anguish. The creature understood better than anyone what was coming. It had seen these enemies before and barely escaped with its life. Now they had found its hiding place, and everyone Tejo cared about was in deadly danger. The first energy blast shattered the station's main communication array in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Tejo watched through the storage bay window as the massive dish that connected them to other human settlements dissolved into molten fragments. Within seconds, mining station Kepler 442b was completely cut off from the outside universe. The attacking creatures moved with terrifying precision. They had studied the station's defenses carefully, targeting the most critical systems while avoiding damage to the main structures. These were not mindless predators seeking food or territory. They wanted the facility intact and operational. Commander Lee's voice crackled over the internal communication system, distorted by interference from the energy weapons outside. All security teams to defensive positions. Seal blast doors on levels 3 through 7. Medical teams prepare for casualties. Tejo felt helpless watching the coordinated assault unfold. The station's defensive weapons fired back at their attackers, but the energy bolts seemed to have little effect on the massive shapes moving through the forest. Whatever armor or shielding these creatures possessed was far superior to human military technology. Beside him, Beko paced frantically around the storage bay, making urgent sounds and gesturing toward the ventilation systems that ran throughout the station. The creature was trying to communicate something important, but panic made it difficult to understand complex messages through gestures alone. The second wave of attacks targeted the station's power distribution center. Multiple energy blasts struck the main reactor housing, causing lights to flicker throughout the facility as backup systems struggled to compensate. Emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow that made the familiar corridors look alien and threatening. "They know exactly where to hit us," Tejo realized aloud. "Someone has been watching the station for weeks, learning our weaknesses." Beko stopped pacing and looked at him with those intelligent amber eyes. The creature nodded gravely, then pointed toward the ceiling and made gestures that suggested observation from above. Surveillance. The attacking force had been studying the human settlement long before launching their assault. Through the storage bay door, Tejo could hear running footsteps and shouted orders as security teams moved through the corridors. The sounds were growing more frantic with each passing minute. Whatever plan Commander Lee had developed for defending the station was not working against this technologically superior enemy. The third attack was different. Instead of targeting external systems, the energy weapons focused on specific sections of the outer hull. Precise cuts appeared in the metal barriers that protected the station from the planet's harsh environment. The attackers were creating entry points for boarding parties. Beko became even more agitated, pointing repeatedly toward the maintenance tunnels that connected different sections of the facility. It gestured urgently at Tejo, then toward the hidden passages, clearly trying to suggest some kind of action. But what could two individuals possibly do against an organized invasion force? The answer came when the first boarding party breached the outer hull near the cargo bays. Tejo caught a glimpse of the invaders through the security monitors still functioning in the storage bay. These creatures were definitely related to Beko but utterly different in temperament and appearance. Where Beko was elegant and peaceful, these beings were built for war. Dark armor covered their massive frames and cruel weapons hung from their equipment harnesses. Ritual scars marked their visible fur in patterns that spoke of violence and conquest. Their eyes held none of Beko's gentle intelligence, only cold calculation and predatory hunger. "They're not your people at all, are they?" Tejo asked his friend quietly. Beko shook its head sadly, then used gestures to explain what Tejo was beginning to understand. Two different species, similar in basic form but completely opposite in nature. One peaceful and scientific, the other aggressive and militaristic. Natural enemies locked in some ancient conflict that had now reached this distant human outpost. The invaders moved through the station with practiced efficiency, herding captured personnel toward the cargo bays while disabling resistance with stunning weapons, rather than lethal force. They wanted prisoners, not corpses. That suggested they saw value in keeping humans alive, though for what purpose remained unclear. Security teams tried to organize defensive positions in the main corridors, but they were hopelessly outmatched. Human weapons designed for dealing with wildlife and minor threats proved useless against advanced alien armor and energy shields. Within 30 minutes of the initial attack, most of the station's defenders had been captured or forced to retreat. Dr. Sora's voice came over the medical bay's emergency channel, reporting that wounded personnel were being treated in the sealed sections, while the main facility fell to the invaders. Her calm professionalism in the crisis impressed Tejo, but he could hear the strain in her voice as she described injuries from weapons that human medicine barely understood. "Commander." Lee's updates became increasingly desperate as his defensive positions collapsed one by one. The invaders seemed to know the station's layout better than some of the people who lived there. They moved through maintenance passages and service corridors with confident familiarity, appearing in areas that should have been secure. "How do they know so much about our systems?" Lee's voice crackled over the intercom before the transmission cut off abruptly. Tejo looked at Beko and saw the answer in his friend's expression. The attacking creatures had access to detailed intelligence about human technology and station layouts. They had either captured and interrogated other humans or had been studying Earth settlements for much longer than anyone realized. But Beko was pointing insistently at something, hidden behind the supply containers. When Tejo investigated, he found sophisticated equipment that definitely hadn't been there the day before. Alien devices hummed with subtle energy, their displays showing detailed schematics of the mining station's internal systems. "You've been monitoring us," Tejo said, but without accusation. "Your people have been watching the station." Beko nodded, then gestured to show that the monitoring had been protective rather than hostile. The peaceful species had been trying to warn the humans about the approaching danger, but translation difficulties had prevented clear communication. The equipment represented their attempt to understand human technology well enough to provide meaningful assistance. One of the devices looked like a sophisticated communication system. Beko activated it with careful touches, and suddenly the storage bay filled with translated voices speaking in clear human language. Tejo could finally understand what his friend had been trying to tell him for weeks. "The Corvan Empire approaches from the outer systems," the translation matrix conveyed. "They enslave peaceful species and strip worlds of resources. Your settlement is marked for conquest. Defensive preparations are insufficient. Evacuation recommended immediately." "Corvan Empire," Tejo repeated, understanding flooding through him. "That's what attacked you. That's what's attacking us now." The communication equipment also revealed that Beko's people, called the Suraki, had established hidden research stations throughout this sector of space. They were peaceful scientists and technicians who studied planetary ecosystems while avoiding contact with more aggressive species. But the Corvan Empire had been systematically hunting down and conquering Suraki settlements, enslaving the survivors and forcing them to maintain captured technology. Beko had escaped during a transport accident while being moved between conquered worlds. The creature's real name was something unpronounceable in human language, but it meant keeper of broken things among the Suraki. Like Tejo, Bekho was a repair technician who understood complex machinery better than most of its own people. We're both the same, Taeho realized. We fix things that others break. The translation system revealed even more disturbing information. The Corvan Empire specifically targeted species with advanced technical knowledge, using them as slave labor to maintain conquered technology and develop new weapons. The human mining station represented exactly the kind of prize they sought, a perfect combination of strategic location and skilled personnel. Outside the storage bay, the sounds of fighting had stopped. Commander Lee's final transmission reported that the main command center had fallen, and that surviving personnel were being gathered in the cargo bays under heavy guard. The invasion was complete, accomplished in less than 2 hours with minimal damage to the facility's infrastructure. But Bekho was still pointing at the maintenance tunnels with obvious urgency. The creature had a plan, something that required accessing the station's hidden systems through passages the Corvan forces hadn't discovered yet. Working together, they might still be able to turn the tide of this seemingly hopeless situation. Working through the hidden maintenance tunnels felt like moving through the veins of a sleeping giant. Taeho led the way through narrow passages he had memorized during 3 years of keeping the station operational, while Bekho followed with a collection of advanced tools that could interface with both human and Corvan technology. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Rather than attempting dramatic explosions or direct confrontation with superior forces, they would make the station increasingly unreliable until the Corvan abandoned it as too troublesome to maintain. Taeho's intimate knowledge of human systems combined with Bekho's advanced technology created possibilities that neither could achieve alone. Their first target was the atmospheric control system. The Corvan had adapted quickly to human air composition, but their comfort zone was much narrower than what humans could tolerate. By creating subtle variations in temperature, humidity, and gas mixtures, they could make the invaders progressively more uncomfortable, without endangering the human prisoners. Bekho's tools interfaced directly with the environmental controls through connections that the Corvan hadn't even discovered yet. The alien technology could manipulate human systems with precision that amazed Taeho, adjusting individual air recyclers throughout the station to create exactly the atmospheric conditions they wanted. "Start with Cargo Bay 7, Taeho whispered, pointing to the schematic display on Bekho's device. "That's where they're holding most of the prisoners. Make it just warm and humid enough to be uncomfortable for the guards, but not dangerous for our people." The changes were so gradual that the Corvan guards didn't notice them at first. Over the course of several hours, the temperature rose by only a few degrees while humidity increased just enough to make their armor feel sticky and confining. The human prisoners, accustomed to much wider environmental variations, barely registered the difference. But the Corvan began showing signs of irritation. They removed pieces of armor to cool themselves, making them slightly less protected. They argued among themselves about equipment malfunctions and poor facility maintenance. Most importantly, they started requesting transfers to other sections of the station. The second phase involved the power distribution network. Taeho knew every circuit and junction box in the facility, understanding exactly which systems could be disrupted without causing dangerous failures. Working through access panels that the invaders hadn't even noticed, he and Bekho began introducing subtle irregularities into the electrical supply. Corvan communication equipment started experiencing interference that looked like normal electronic noise. Their weapons required constant recharging as power cells drained faster than expected. Lighting systems flickered just enough to be annoying without plunging areas into complete darkness. "They're starting to suspect sabotage." Bekho communicated through the translation device as they watched security patrols on the maintenance monitors, but they cannot locate the source of the problems. The Corvan response was predictable and helpful to their cause. The invaders began checking obvious sabotage targets like main power lines and primary control systems, completely missing the distributed network of subtle modifications that Taeho and Bekho had implemented throughout the facility's infrastructure. By the second day of their campaign, the Corvan forces were showing clear signs of stress and confusion. Equipment failures that should have been simple to diagnose became mysteriously complex when the repair teams discovered multiple small problems instead of obvious damage. Systems that worked perfectly for human technicians failed consistently when operated by Corvan personnel. The most effective sabotage involved the station's computer networks. Taeho had always been proud of the elegant programming that controlled everything from mining schedules to life support systems. Now he used that same elegance to create chaos that looked completely natural. Database queries returned slightly wrong information. Navigation systems developed minor calibration errors that accumulated over time. Even simple tasks like opening doors or accessing storage lockers became unreliable in ways that suggested random malfunctions rather than deliberate interference. Your species has a gift for making complex systems appear simple, Backhoe observed as they programmed another subtle glitch into the cargo bay access controls. The Corvin cannot understand how everything can fail simultaneously without obvious cause. The psychological impact was even more important than the practical effects. The Corvin had conquered dozens of worlds through superior technology and overwhelming force. They were not prepared for an enemy that fought back through patient, technical expertise rather than dramatic military action. Arguments broke out among the invading forces as different groups blamed each other for the cascading equipment failures. Some Corvin demanded that human prisoners be executed as punishment for suspected sabotage. Others insisted that keeping the humans alive was essential for maintaining the complex systems they didn't fully understand. The crisis point came when the Corvin transport ship in orbit began experiencing similar mysterious malfunctions. Backhoe's advanced tools had accessed the vessel's systems through communication links with the ground forces, introducing the same kind of subtle problems that plagued the station itself. They cannot retreat if their ship is unreliable, Backhoe explained. But they cannot advance if the station systems continue failing. Soon they must choose between abandoning the conquest or requesting reinforcements they may not receive. On the third day, the Corvin commander made the mistake that Taeho and Backhoe had been hoping for. Frustrated by the endless equipment failures, he ordered his technical teams to perform comprehensive diagnostic scans of all station systems simultaneously. The massive power drain from running so many diagnostic systems at once overloaded the already stressed power grid that Taeho and Backhoe had carefully sabotaged. Circuit breakers throughout the facility tripped in cascading failures that left entire sections without power. In the chaos that followed, several groups of human prisoners managed to escape from cargo bays where the electronic locks had failed. Commander Lee led one group to the sealed medical section, where Dr. Sora had been treating wounded personnel, while other survivors reached emergency shelters that the Corvin had not yet discovered. But the most important development was the restoration of the main communication array. Working frantically during the power failures, Taeho and Backhoe had repaired just enough of the damaged systems to send a distress signal toward the nearest human military depot. The message was brief but effective. Mining station Kepler 442b was under attack by hostile alien forces and required immediate military assistance. The transmission included detailed tactical information about Corvin weapons and armor that Backhoe had provided through the translation system. More importantly, the message identified the Suraki as potential allies in the fight against the Corvin Empire. If human military forces could establish contact with Backhoe's people, both species might benefit from shared knowledge and coordinated resistance against their common enemy. The Corvin response to the equipment failures and prisoner escapes was swift and brutal. They began preparations for systematic destruction of the station, rather than continued occupation. If they could not hold the facility reliably, they would ensure that no one else could use it either. But their transport ship was still experiencing the mysterious malfunctions that prevented safe departure from the planet's orbit. The Corvin ground forces found themselves trapped on an increasingly hostile world, surrounded by equipment they could not trust and facing an enemy they could not locate or defeat through conventional military tactics. The stage was set for a final confrontation that would determine whether the human mining station survived as a symbol of successful resistance or became another casualty of Corvin expansion. The liberation came not through explosive battles or dramatic heroics, but through the quiet persistence of two repair technicians who understood that sometimes the most powerful weapon was patience combined with technical knowledge. By the fourth day of their sabotage campaign, the Corvin forces were ready to abandon the mining station entirely. The final stroke was inspired by Backhoe's deep understanding of Corvin psychology and technology. Using the advanced tools hidden in his fur, he accessed the invaders' own communication systems and convinced their computers that the station contained dangerous biological contamination that threatened all personnel. Following their own safety protocols, the Corvin evacuated to emergency shelters they had established in the forest around the station. Their rigid military discipline, which had made them such effective conquerors, now worked against them as they followed contamination procedures that required immediate withdrawal from infected areas. Within hours, the mining station was free of invaders. Human personnel emerged from hiding places and sealed sections to find their facility largely intact, but completely abandoned by the enemy forces. The Corvin had left behind weapons and equipment in their haste to escape what they believed was a deadly plague zone. Dr. Sora was the first person besides Tai-Ho to meet Baek-Ho face-to-face. Her initial shock at encountering an alien gave way to professional curiosity when she realized that this being had been instrumental in saving the station. The medical examination that followed established the groundwork for understanding Suraki physiology and confirmed that the two species were biologically compatible for peaceful coexistence. Commander Lee's first meeting with Baek-Ho was more formal but equally positive. Through the translation matrix, they negotiated the beginnings of a mutual defense agreement that would benefit both humans and Suraki in their resistance against Corvin expansion. The commander's military experience helped him appreciate the strategic value of advanced alien technology, combined with human tactical flexibility. "Your people saved us," Lee told Baek-Ho during their first official diplomatic discussion. "Our weapons and defenses would never have been enough against the Corvin forces. Without your help, we would all be prisoners or dead." Baek-Ho's response, conveyed through the translation system, was characteristically modest. "Tai-Ho saved me first. I only returned the kindness that was given freely when I was wounded and alone. Our peoples share more similarities than differences. We both value life and learning over conquest and destruction." The weeks following the liberation were filled with remarkable discoveries as human and Suraki technologies began merging in ways that neither species had imagined possible. Baek-Ho remained on the station as a permanent ambassador, working alongside Tai-Ho to maintain increasingly sophisticated hybrid systems that combined the best aspects of both civilizations. The mining operation expanded beyond simple resource extraction to include research and development projects that push the boundaries of what either species could achieve alone. Human manufacturing capabilities merged with Suraki scientific knowledge to create innovations that impressed even the advanced alien visitors who began arriving from other Suraki research stations. Tai-Ho found himself appointed as the station's official liaison to their new allies, a role that suited his quiet temperament perfectly. He continued fixing machines, but now those machines included technologies that opened possibilities he had never dreamed of during his years as a simple repair technician. The friendship between Tai-Ho and Baek-Ho deepened through shared work and mutual respect. They spent their days developing new solutions to technical problems that challenged both human ingenuity and Suraki precision. Their evenings were devoted to teaching each other about their respective cultures and histories. "We are both keepers of broken things," Baek-Ho observed one evening as they worked together on a particularly complex fusion reactor design. "But perhaps our greatest achievement is mending the relationship between our peoples." The mining station became a symbol of interspecies cooperation throughout the sector. Other human settlements began requesting technical assistance and defensive consultations, while Suraki research teams shared their knowledge freely with anyone willing to use it for peaceful purposes. The Corvin Empire made several attempts to recapture the facility, but each attack met with increasingly sophisticated resistance. The combined human-Suraki defense network grew stronger with every confrontation, eventually becoming powerful enough to protect entire systems from Corvin aggression. Dr. Sora established the first interspecies medical exchange program, learning Suraki healing techniques while teaching human surgical procedures to alien colleagues. Her research into comparative biology laid the groundwork for medical advances that benefited both civilizations. Commander Lee coordinated the expansion of the Mutual Defense Network, helping other human colonies establish contact with peaceful alien species who were also resisting Corvin expansion. His military expertise proved invaluable in organizing joint operations that protected vulnerable settlements throughout the region. Yoon Nari, the communications officer who had first detected the energy signatures from Baek-Ho's equipment, became the chief translator for human Suraki diplomatic exchanges. Her linguistic skills helped bridge the gap between species with very different ways of expressing complex ideas. The most significant development came when the combined human-Siraki research teams developed a new form of space travel that was faster and more efficient than anything either species had achieved independently. The breakthrough opened previously unreachable star systems for exploration and colonization, expanding the sphere of peaceful civilization beyond Corvan influence. Taeho never sought recognition for his role in these remarkable changes. He remained content with his workshop, now expanded to accommodate both human and alien technologies, where he continued doing what he loved most: fixing things that were broken and creating solutions that made life better for everyone around him. But everyone on the station knew that their freedom and prosperity had begun with one simple act of compassion. When Taeho found a wounded creature bleeding in a storage bay, he had chosen to help rather than report the incident to authorities. That choice had changed the course of history for both species. The white leopard had indeed returned the favor, but the real reward was the partnership they had built together. Two repair technicians from different worlds had proven that the most profound connections often begin with the simplest acts of kindness. Years later, when historians wrote about the first successful human-alien alliance, they would focus on the diplomatic negotiations and military strategies that made it possible. But those who lived through those remarkable times knew the truth. It all began when a quiet man who fixed machines decided to help a wounded stranger, and that stranger chose to trust him in return. In the depths of mining station Kepler 442b, surrounded by the gentle hum of perfectly maintained equipment, Taeho and Baekho continued their work, fixing what was broken, creating what was needed, building bridges between worlds through patient technical expertise and mutual respect. The universe was vast and often dangerous, filled with species that chose conquest over cooperation. But it was also home to beings like Taeho and Baekho, who proved that sometimes the most powerful force in existence was simple human decency, combined with the willingness to help those in need. The mining station thrived as a beacon of hope in a troubled galaxy, showing all who encountered it that different species could live and work together in harmony. And at the heart of it all were two friends who had learned that fixing machines was just the beginning. The real work was mending the relationships between peoples and creating something entirely new from the pieces of what had been broken. Their story became legend, inspiring countless others to choose compassion over fear when encountering the unknown. The simple repair technician and the wounded white leopard had changed everything, one small act of kindness at a time.